because it doesn't really matter what the addiction is. I mean, truthfully, it's not food we're really craving. It's not coffee we're craving. It is connection that we're craving.
All right, what's up? We're back. Happy New Year. You know I say Happy New Year until like deep March, and I don't think I've said it to you yet. I did put out the episode with Christine, but I didn't do a proper intro to that because it was a video. This one's a video too. What's the deal with video? I mean, I know what the deal is. I understand. Don't you worry. But do you want video? Who's here? And whoever is here, please let me know, because as you know, for the 12, 13, however many years it's been that I've been doing this, we haven't done video, but it seems like everyone's doing video now. I don't know. You let me know. I'll say it. I don't want to do video, but I'll do anything for you. You know that. All right, we're back. This is part 2 of my conversation with Tricia Nelson. And by part 2, I mean it's a completely different, separate conversation that we recorded on a different day. If you did listen to the last episode before the episodes with Christine, it was with emotional eating expert Tricia Nelson, and she's back again this week because at the end of that episode, you may remember, I asked her about the connection between emotional eating and eating issues and relationships, and where we pick up in what you're about to hear is right there, and we zone in on that question, which is fitting for the week that it is Valentine's Day. Happy Valentine's Day. It's more related than you think it would be. Yes, it's an episode on emotional eating, but in the center of this, I cry because of how my complex relationship with emotions and eating, and the two of them together, has impacted other people in my life and my relationships. I have been learning a lot more about that, and there are layers, which is what I'm learning. But I hope that this episode is interesting to some of you. I hope it's helpful to those of you who, unfortunately for you, relate to me. And I hope that you send it to someone who it might be helpful to. But we get into how long-term issues with food, like I have, can not only hurt our own mental and physical well-being and health, but how they impact other people and our lives more holistically, and how isolating ourselves makes those issues worse, how connection and openness and honesty with other people is actually essential to changing and shifting and healing. And we get into how emotional responsibility includes being not only aware of the ways that we are hurting ourselves, but the ways that our struggles with food impact intimacy in relationships, communication, because when you're feeling bad about yourself or your body, it's, intimacy takes a hit. And another thing about eating disorders is that you're always hiding and lying essentially to yourself and to other people, so communication takes a hit, and we get into all of it. It's just a nice, breezy, light conversation. But truly, there is some lightness to me in talking to Tricia, because she has worked with people on this issue for decades and has had a lot of success, and she gives some practical ways that she helps people and has been able to, through the work that she does, shift these deep-rooted patterns. And she gets into how she does that, which is very much related to Let It Out, because she explains that one of the ways that she sees improvement in people is when they are able to safely express their emotions, and how crucial detrimental that is to shifting compulsive eating behaviors. And ultimately, Tricia emphasizes that it's possible with support and consistency to change. And I found that really helpful to hear. And this is a conversation about learning to feel and connect and do things we don't want to do that are good for us, instead of numbing out or turning to the thing that can give us temporary comfort. And it's intense, but it's important, and it's kind of what I need to hear right now. So I am really happy to be here. And how are you doing? What's new with you? Let me know. I'm gonna try to be optimistic, and I actually am optimistic. I don't even have to try. Actually, I do have to try, but I'm willing to try, and I want to try, and join me. All right, here's my conversation with Tricia. Oh, I remembered what I wanted to tell you, which was, if you read the Substack, the last one I wrote was sort of about this and my history with this and where I'm at with this now, with a holiday spin of the ghost of eating past, present, and what's to come. I'm not sure if the Scrooge thing worked or not, but I tried to make it festive. But the point is, I wrote very candidly and honestly about this there, and a lot of you listening were really nice about it and related, and that means a lot to me. Again, okay, at the end of our last episode, I asked you a question, and you were like, that is way too big for the amount of time that we have, but you offered to come back.
Yep.
And I took you up on it. I'm so glad you were serious about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's start right there. I think I was asking some version of what the connection is between romantic relationships or lack of them and emotional eating, and how even cohabitation with someone and being in a relationship or out of a relationship affects the process. And I hadn't really heard that talked about much, but since looking into your work even further since the last episode, I've realized that you've actually talked about all of these things quite a bit. So I'd love to talk about it with you here.
Absolutely. So the connection between emotional eating and relationships, yes, that's a big one. I mean, to be honest, I just got back from being with my family, my mom and stepdad, and my sisters and their families. And it was an intense week. And while I was there, I thought, oh my God, I used to only, on my recovery journey early on, I used to only be able to hang out with my family for 3 days. Like, that was my max. I was thinking, and that was my max because I don't overeat beyond that. Like, I couldn't hold it together longer than 3 days. So I learned that. I'm like, okay, that's my limit. If I'm going to hang out with my family, which I didn't want to do a whole lot because I had a lot of stuff. And we do have a lot of stuff around family. That's the scene of the crime, And so not only that, but my sisters both have eating, they've overcome eating issues too. So we were 3 for 3. My older sisters and I, we were 3 siblings, and we all had eating issues. So of course our parents had their own stuff. We all kind of gained weight easily. And we all had our own recovery path. So the good news is we all sought healing in our own ways. And that is great news, because now, fast forward many years, we get along really well. We get along really well. It's really a pleasure, but it doesn't mean it's not intense. They're both therapists, and I'm not a therapist per se, but I'm a coach, and I do healing work with people. So we're all like processors.
Yeah.
They more than me, because they love it. They love to talk things out more than I do. I'm like, let's get to the point and get some healing and move on. But they love to process and talk about things. So it can be intense, and we had a really intense week, and a lot of what we were talking about was my crotchety stepdad, who triggers everybody. Like, everybody. So we all end up talking about him and how to deal with him and how to love him and find forgiveness in our hearts for him. So it was an intense week. And I just, I was so grateful that I can do more than 3 days now. Like I
Mm.
literally was with them for 8 days and there wasn't a respite. Like it was intense. Now, I will say my partner came with me and he's really good at kind of assessing the situation and he's got a lot of emotional intelligence. So we sort of did our own processing of
Mhm.
things. But I'm grateful for the healing that I've had, that I can stand to be with my family as long as I can, and it's actually joyful, but it's not light. It's not
Yeah.
light. It's pretty intense. But anyway, but I'm light. I mean, that's the good news is I'm light.
Yeah, that's huge growth. I
Yeah.
I I heard you talk about your relationship with mostly your mom, but, like, family in general, and I related to it so much, and it's a incredible video kind of going over that, but specifically, having other people to you say that exact thing, that you did with your partner of not going to the hardware store for milk, so to speak, of not
Yeah.
having to process with your family or having to be seen completely or understood or having people to do that is so helpful. And yeah, it sounds like you really had your self in place to be able to be there and be present and be the light.
Yeah. You can't step over the work, the inner work, and be like, I'm going to love them and I'm just going to be compassionate. Because when you have anger and resentment in your heart, you end up just overeating. Like, can't be phony, as much as, and honestly, I was phony, I tried to bring the love, and the lightness, but inside I was a seething cauldron of pain, and
Yeah.
so, that's why I would overeat, to keep that pain down, right? Locked in
Yeah.
place so it didn't come flying out in different ways. But I was the casualty of not addressing that stuff, and so, I went around with a smile on my face all the time, and, of course, telling everybody I'm fine, which we know is an acronym for effed up, insecure, neurotic, and emotional. So I wasn't fine at all, and so, on the healing path from, healing from overeating, emotional eating, undereating, it's all emotional to me, and so I use the words emotional eating, but on that path, I have to get real. Like, it's not about getting good, it's about getting real,
Yeah.
and so I have to get real about the fact that I am a seething cauldron of resentment and hurt. And
Yeah.
we are, like, you don't have an eating issues because, everything's wonderful. You have eating issues because you have wounds. You have
Yeah.
wounds and you're trying to deal with those wounds with, using food, or not deal with those wounds by stuffing them down with food. So there's no question we have to do our work in order to truly be light and love, and so, and that's not a pretty path, but it's a vital path. And I think I my wish for everybody is that you do seek a healing journey by getting support, because you definitely can't do it alone. And it doesn't necessarily have to be from a therapeutic standpoint, like through therapy. It can be through other means. I mean, I'm not a therapist, but I take people through this kind of work. So it's just we have to get real about what's
Yeah.
inside of us so we can clear it out, so that then we're not packing it down. Like, that's the bottom line, is we don't want to pack it down with food. We want to clear it so that we can have, that beautiful light moving through us.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I've said this to you every time we've talked now, but I I've really like never related to someone this much, and you speak right to some of these things that I've heard other practitioners and other writers talk about, but I love how candid you are, and I relate so much to that. And I don't even know if you know this, but my work in my book, which I wanna send you a copy of it, it's called Let It Out because of this exact reason. I think what we hold on to hurts us. And I
Yes.
think, as you say, uh, what we push down.
Say it or stuff it.
Yes, that's what I was trying to think of. Thank you. Say it or stuff it. Yeah, and you talk about how, going back to the family thing, how many of us grew up in families that didn't know how to process emotions. It sounds like your sisters certainly do now, but in my case, and I think so many, we were encouraged or even applauded for stuffing our feelings. And I think that early conditioning can show up later as emotional eating. And what now, I have the tools of going to other people to process, whether that's in an actual setting, or I have incredible friends that I can go there with. But beyond family, there are so many settings now, workplaces, social situations, where we're still expected or encouraged to stuff our feelings down. And I understand that, it's not like good or safe to emote at all times, but that can build up. And I think what I'm dealing with now is the build up and then not knowing really how to feel completely. My knee jerk currently still is to stuff it down, and I'm really learning how to express it. But how do you help people feel safely in a culture that, essentially rewards suppression?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think you just said the operative word, and that's safety. How do you safely do it? We don't do it when we don't feel safe. And I think, yeah, as a culture, we're still stuffing a whole lot. So, like, I don't know any family that's super good at processing, like, let's talk about that. Some people
Mhm.
are probably, if they're super conscious, they're conscious parents, which is great, but it's the minority, and I think as a culture, we're always looking to fix our feelings. Like, what can we do to fix this so we don't have to deal with it, And so denial is part of, I mean, to me, it's part of the condition of being an emotional eater is that, don't even notice I'm lying. Denial stands for don't even notice I'm lying as an acronym because it becomes a habit. So what starts out as a survival skill, which is don't say how you feel, because in a lot of families, it wasn't safe to, I mean, you would get ridiculed. I mean, in my family, my oldest sister got ridiculed for having feelings. And then as the youngest one, and I totally got the best deal being the youngest because my parents, mellowed, but I watched her get ridiculed for being fat for one thing, but also for her feelings. And of course, I got the message straight from that. Oh, I'm not going to risk it. I'm going to say
Yeah.
how I feel. So whether it's being done to you or you're witnessing it, you're filing away. This is not a safe place to be me. And so safety is critical to the healing journey. Like, you have to feel safe enough to let it out, like you said, and your book. I would absolutely love to have a copy of your book. Thank you. So I, I had this thought. I had so many crazy thoughts and feelings. Like, I grew up just there's so much that went on inside of me. To me, overeaters are overthinkers. So we are like thinking double time, So we have just a rash of really fearful, dramatic thoughts all the time, such that I was scaring myself. Like, I would scare myself. And so I thought, if anybody ever knew, this is what went through my head. If anybody ever knew what I was thinking, lordy, lordy, like Kate, like they would lock me up, is what I thought. They would lock me up. And so, yeah, I had this internal thought life that I kept as a secret, and there's a saying, we're as sick as our secrets. And so I just didn't tell anybody. But again, then I used food to keep it down. So we have to feel safe enough with somebody, or maybe with a community of people, preferably, not just one person, where we can let it out and let like people know what we're thinking. And the crazy thing is about being an emotional eater, again, of whatever version, overeating, undereating, binge eating, bulimia, orthorexia, it doesn't really matter. To me, we're so similar, so similar. So the thing about it is we all have the same, the details might vary a little bit, but we all have the same nature of thoughts and feelings, including I'm the only one thinking this way, So when I did my TEDx talk where I reenact binge eating and binging, throwing away the rest of the, binge foods and then going back later in the garbage to get it, when I reenact that, there's always all these comments on my TEDx talk. It's like, oh my God, I did that. And I thought I was the only one.
Yeah.
Turns out so many of us have done the same thing. And so we do have to come out of the closet and say, hey, me too. Our version of me too is I did those crazy things with food also. And so that to me is that only happens when you do feel safe, when you're not going to get ridiculed for it. But it's especially healing when you do it with other emotional eaters, because we for sure won't ridicule you, and we for sure will pretty much raise our hand and say, oh yeah, I did that, oh for sure, and so that in itself is so healing to realize we're not the only ones, and to the point where you can kind of laugh about it, like, oh my God, like the places we've hid our food, right? And the
And it
ways
helps with shame.
Oh, so much. Because, yes, shame is thinking we're the only ones. Yeah, I thought, because I dug, cookies out of the garbage, I thought I am the worst person in the world. I thought it was so bad. And again, I thought I was the only one. I mean, now, like with my clients, we laugh about the ways in which we covered up the food to make sure we didn't get it. Someone uses coffee grounds, another person uses dishwashing soap. I mean, I've heard it all,
Oh my gosh, yeah. I got a couple.
So that safety is really critical.
It's interesting. I mean, this is the first time I'm like saying this out loud, but when you were talking about the family stuff, I've had this feeling for the last couple of years. I come from a sea of disordered eating. I would have said emotional eating, and for reasons that I learned over time. But I grew up just kind of, until I was in treatment, like thinking like, oh, that's just how they are, but it was. Anyway, just I guess looking at these systems, what you said about being able to spend time with them. I'm from a college town. I went to college there. And so I still through college went to all the 6 birthday parties and all of it. And the happiest I ever was when I studied abroad and I had some autonomy over what I ate. And I took that to the other end of the extreme of like being able to control it too much. What's hitting me hard of what you're saying today is it doesn't matter if you're pretending to feel better or you have even the awareness, because I think I can have the self-awareness. It's the integration that is coming now, I think. But I do remember being at those gatherings after I had had some time away and coming back with my family, and I discovered journaling, which sounds silly. Like it was my first time I had an iPhone in college, and I remember just going into the bathroom during one of these run-of-the-mill family birthdays, and I just wrote out how I was feeling, and I felt that's like why I wrote that book, and in a way why I'm here, why I started this show, why I'm talking to you now, because that was so revelatory for me. It sounds dramatic, but because exactly like you were saying, it was the first time I was admitting to myself the thoughts I was having in my brain. And I was listening to this old conversation you did with John Gray, and he was saying this too. We're so much more honest with ourselves than we'll ever be with anyone. And I think that's what I was experiencing. And I think just today, right now, I made the connection of, oh, that was why what I was suppressing, I started saying, and it was directly related to my eating issues and still is. I am so lucky. I never feel more free than after a great conversation, processing something with a friend, whether it's deeply being locked in with what they're moving through or me, but it's this honest connection with yourself or other people. And it's just so helpful. And I think the family stuff is I have more work to do to get up to 8 days, like you're saying, but inching closer, the more honest I get with myself.
Yeah. Yeah, I think nobody really wants to sit down and write. And I think it's because on some level, we know the truth will come out,
Yeah.
and we spent so much time overeating to cover up the truth. And
Yeah.
so it's like, I'm not gonna write that stuff down because then I'll have to look at it. But of course, it's like people think they're gonna have to look at it, but I think what they're thinking is they're gonna be stuck with it.
Mhm.
And there's no faster way to get rid of it than to just own it, write it down, and then it loses its power, and of
Yeah.
course, reading it to somebody safe is really helpful too. But the point is we are so afraid of the truth. We're so afraid of the truth. And I think we're afraid of the truth because we're afraid that once we'll be stuck with it, but also if we know we're going to have to do something.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
We're gonna have to change, and that's
Yeah.
scary. That's a whole 'nother level of scary. So there's a lot of
Completely.
fear. Yep.
Yeah, I talk about in the book, it's like it puts a mirror up in your face and then you
Yeah.
have to face what you've been avoiding. I think I have this distinction in the book of like there's two types of journalers, maintenance journalers and SOS journalers. And I continue to be both, but I'm sure you can relate to this. The SOS is like you are like pregnant with something you need to process, like you had,
Yes.
and often then I don't want to sit down and do it. I avoid it for a few days, and then when I do, it's like a big, and also it takes a lot of time. Like it can be annoying if you have to be somewhere. You might not have the time to like get in there, so you just have to put it aside for a bit, but, mark it so you can come back to it. I think it's very connected with all of this. I wanna go back a little bit to romantic relationships because I think that's something that like what we were saying with journaling, I see a really big connection with my eating issues and being in and out of those, and something that you've talked about is how our addiction or emotional eating impacts other people in the sense that it's not their job to get us binge food, but it's also not their job to have to deal with the fallout of after overeating or undereating, all the self-hate or the body shame or the withdrawal or the not wanting to have sex. And what does emotional responsibility look like in relationships when someone is someone who struggles with emotional eating or has?
Yeah, for sure. I think that obviously not hiding one's situation is really important. We do best is we hide and pretend. And that is so destructive for a relationship. So if somebody is, binging and purging in secret, it's just not it's just a bad it's a bad effect, on a relationship to have secrets of any kind. Obviously having affairs or having an affair with food, this it's hard to live with somebody like us and not know the self-esteem struggles. It's obvious. I mean, even with all the work that I've done, when I started dating my current partner, we've been together for 5 years, but he had to give me some pointers on better self-talk, and he'll scold me when I say something self-deprecating that's just doesn't it's not good for me. It's not good for me to dog myself for not being smart enough or not being good enough at something. He's like, "That's bullshit. You're good at that. Stop it. Like, stop saying that." So, he's been really good for my self-esteem, but the secrets around food are obviously super, we can hide them if we're doing things like, bulimia or whatever. And it's not fair to somebody to be dealing with half truths. And you can't have a healthy relationship with secrets. You just can't. It's just it's a wall that's in between you and the other person. So, you know, uh, and I'm not saying you have to say everything that you're thinking to your partner because that may not be the best thing either. But in terms of the secretive behaviors around food, I think it's really important that we be super honest, and so letting somebody know you're struggling is important. And letting somebody know you have a history with food stuff. I mean, my guy knows he's never seen me in a bad way with food, but I want to make sure he knows I'm not cured, and I could get in a bad way. And so I'm like, look, if I start fooling around with certain foods that are triggering for me, or behaviors or whatever, it can get bad. Like, I can fall off a cliff. And so he knows this, and so I just want him to know I look normal, I sound normal, I'm in the best place I'm in the healthiest I've ever been. But, here's where I come from. Here's where I come from. And so I make that clear. And that's my truth. My truth is I'm an emotional eater, dyed in the wool, and I could fall off a cliff if I don't do the things that I do. And that helps him respect what I need to do for self-care when he doesn't try to convince me not to do it, or, "Oh, come on,
Mm.
don't be boring," or "Don't be," whatever. Like, he's in full support of my self-care because he knows like, I've given him a very clear description of what falling off the cliff looks like, and he's like,
Yeah.
"Oh, no, I don't want that." So,
I'm so happy that you have him, and that sounds like a really wonderful situation, and what you were saying about, like, bringing it up, and I have a lot of questions and notes related to that. The opposite of, like, not because it's all hiding, like, in the situation that I'm in, like, and I noticed a pattern in myself where my eating feels more regulated when I'm with someone and worse when I'm living alone, and it reminds me of how when I was younger, and we talked about this last time, of, like, how we'd wish to have a disease because it would, make us smaller, but I think my version of that now is I think that when I'm in a relationship again, that will save me from my eating issues, which is essentially like something external would fix me.
yeah.
Is that kind of fantasy common for emotional eaters, believing that a relationship would be a solution when you've been single for a long time? Have you seen
I
that?
Well, I think just the idea of a quick fix,
Yeah.
we're very susceptible to that, right? Like, we've been looking for quick fixes our whole lives, and food is one of them. So I think that's absolutely true, and I've done that. Oh, if I'm hanging out with this person, I won't have time to binge, or I won't be able to get my binge foods or whatever, And so what a poor premise for a relationship, right? Like,
Yeah,
you're
you're
gonna
using
save
yeah.
me some for myself, and it's like, what we really want is we want, obviously, to be as whole as possible. And I don't know who I said this to, but it struck me one day. I'm like, why would I ask somebody to be with me if I can't stand being with me?
Yeah.
Right? Like, is that
Oh
fair?
my gosh.
No.
Yeah.
you know? And so, and God, there's so many people in the world. I've done a few podcast episodes on what it's like what like being married to us, being in relationship with us, being, family members to us, because it's a ride. It's not easy. And I even did, one time I did a husband panel where some husbands of my clients we did a panel, and they talked about what it's like.
Wow.
Yeah, it was pretty powerful, and should probably make that a podcast episode, but they talked about how painful it is to be with somebody who is struggling so much with this condition, and they love us, they wanna help us, they wanna save us, they would totally save us if they could, and they can't, there's no such thing. There's no such thing. They can
Yeah.
support, they can love, but when we're hating ourselves, it's like nobody can really step in and intervene. when we're at war with ourselves. Nobody
Mm.
can really stand in the way of us hurting ourselves. So that's the key, is like we've got to do the work. It's ours to do.
Yeah. It's really interesting because it feels like being supervised even is the cure or a quick fix that I think my brain goes to recently. But of course, I will never be supervised at all times. I need to be able to be alone and thinking about isolation and emotional eating. I have this shame now too of I had this big breakup right before the pandemic, and that relationship ended like pretty much because of my eating disorder, and I had to like go back into treatment for that. And I think I'm just now like I like I feel how emotional and like heavy that is and was. And um and yeah, and I tried so hard after that to like mine the relationship for gyms and not do those things again. And then what's happened since is I've spent a lot of time alone and eating and living alone. A friend of mine posted that when her husband's out of town, she said, "I'm working until 9 p.m. and then I'm hunched in front of the sink eating cold pasta." And I relate, but that's my everyday.
Mm.
I guess like in Sex and the City, they say like the secret single behaviors. But what I'm most scared of now is like I've gotten so used to being alone and living alone and yeah. So when people do have a lot of time alone, does your approach differ at all? I guess.
I mean, my experience is the only hope is healing the terrible compulsion to eat, right? Like there's no human can stop us from binging if we have a compulsion to eat. Like you can drop one of us on an ice cap in Alaska or and we'll figure it out. Like we'll get some binge food somehow. That compulsion to eat is so horrible, right? And it comes from within, and it's you can't stop it. I mean, I remember one time, this is like 30 years ago, but we worked with one gal who was bulimic, and her dad was a physician, and she asked him to, he didn't agree to it, but she begged him to induce a coma for her, like induce like anesthesia for her somehow so that she could get a respite from her binging and purging. I mean, that's how desperate she was, and you and I have talked about getting a disease, so we'll automatically lose weight. It's like this condition is so horrible and so fierce, and none of these tricks or hacks will work. And the only hope is to have the obsession and compulsion to overeat removed. That's really the only hope. And my experience is that compulsion comes from three places. The first place is it comes from uh, obviously emotions, okay? Emotions that are desperately needing to be healed, addressed, and healed. The second is from stress, because as emotional eaters, stress is big for us. And a lot of times the stress is self-created. It's not just what's going on outside of us. It's literally from what's going on inside of us. We create stress from people pleasing. We create stress from caring about what people think of us too much. We create stress from having racing minds. And the third is habit, where food has become our habit, our way of being. And these three things to me are what create that internal pressure that becomes that compulsion we can't stop. And no partner can stop, right? And so, unless and until we address that, we're always going to be on the merry-go-round of eating and trying not to eat and doing crazy things to not have to eat. And that's just a hard way to go. But my experience is, and the good news is it can be healed. But those are the three main places that we need to put our attention. It's not through controlling food, obviously, or controlling the compulsion. We definitely need new self-care habits. We need community. For me, it's not food we're really hungry for. So we need community with other emotional eaters. We also need a voice that's louder than our own head talking to us. So we need coaching. So these are the things that are components in my program because, the one-on-one is important. The community is important. Also having a clear system, a clear-cut system for healing because there's so much different advice out there. And if you follow all of it, you're just going to
Yeah.
be confused. So my experience is you really need a clear-cut, path to follow. And the cool thing about that is even if you don't follow it, which nobody does it perfectly anyway and shouldn't try to, that's part of our problem, is trying to be perfect. But when you have a path, like I give people, it's so clear that if you fall off or, fall down the rabbit hole, um, you can go back and look at where you fell off. Like, what wasn't I doing? So a path is just as good as when you're following it as when you're not following it. Because then you're like, oh, I didn't know I needed that step. Like that piece, I guess, is important, and you can go back and you can course correct and you can get back on track a lot more quickly. And so that's how I help people is having that clear path and also giving people the opportunity to have consistency. So creating new habits is not easy. And there's a saying that it takes 21 days to create a new habit. Not if you've had it for your lifetime. It's going to take a lot longer. And so you're going to need help to be consistent because you're not going to create new habits unless you're consistent. James Clear, who wrote the best-selling book, Atomic Habits, he said consistency is greatness and greatness is consistency. But consistency is hard for us because we are dealing with the hardest of all addictions, which is food. And you got to eat.
Yeah. Tiger out of the cage.
Yeah. So all the more reason why you're going to need a ton of support to get consistent with a new path. You're never going to do that on your own. So that just a recap, having the coaching, the community, a clear system, and then the consistency to make it, to literally change your neural pathways. That's what I give to people. And to me, that's what's most important.
I need to do it. I mean, I just cried talking about my relationship. I think that there's like some shame of like I've been talking to experts and like doing this work like since being out of treatment. They're just like, all right, well, your weight restored, like everything's better. And then I remember even thinking that then I was like 21 and 22 and thinking, oh my, like no one's checking. Like I don't have to stuff my pockets with rocks anymore, like not go to the bathroom, all these things I would do for the weigh-ins. But like just know at a certain, and I think there's a connection to that with why I wanted to talk about relationships so much because of this supervision thing of like, what am I doing? Wanting someone to be my treatment, like wanting, and I think much like food though, with the, your great analogy that you said from last time of like having to take and it's in your TED talk, I think too, of taking the tiger out of the cage several times a day and not being able to practice abstinence with this addiction. I think relationships are similar in the sense of I have a sample size of and especially that last relationship and really all of them. Like my tendency, and I don't know if you've talked about this or anyone else has talked about this, but a pattern that I see now in me is whenever I'm in a relationship or whenever I have a crush, I tend to get smaller and not eat as much because I'm not turning to food for comfort and connection because I'm getting that through someone else. And then when I'm not, it's the opposite. So of course I want the relationship more, and that's not fair. And I'm exactly like you said, if I don't want to spend time with me, why would anyone else? But it's cool. I'm going to do your program and work with you, and I'm going to fix that right up. So
Yeah, let's do that.
so it's fine. But yeah, it's just, I guess we all have different patterns with this, and trying to fill that void. And I mentioned this to you when we like spoke briefly between episodes, but you have a video where you talked about this Alfred's coffee addiction while your partner was out of town, and in that you talk about how the desire was removed, like you asked for it to be removed, and I really want that to happen. How do you do that? Like, how does desire actually fall away instead of becoming this, battle?
Yeah, well, absolutely. It's just really, really important. I mean, it's a process, it's a process, and you can have that. Like, you can have that. Like, that's because it doesn't really matter what the addiction is. I mean, truthfully, it's not food we're really craving. It's not coffee we're craving. It is connection that we're craving. It is. It just is connection, which makes sense when you have it in a partner. It's just that partners aren't capable of helping us with our eating disorders, like, because they have no idea what they're getting into. So they're not really equipped, and it's frustrating because they can love us, but they don't get us. In my experience is we need community and connection with people who do get us. And that feeds our soul. That's really what's feeding our soul. And we can have that day in and day out. And then we can show up for partners better,
Yeah.
because we're not depending on them to be that for us, because they just can't. If you have never had an eating disorder, if you have not been obsessed with food and weight, it's hard to understand. It's just a bizarre condition. Or obsessed with cookies. It's like,
Yeah.
girl, just eat one. I'm like,
It's
no.
a bizarre condition.
Yeah, like, why would you want one cookie? That makes no sense whatsoever. And why would you stop eating before you've eaten it all? Like, that makes no sense. Like you have to know it. Like, you have to be us to know us, and that's why, in my experience, the health practitioners can't help, or
Yeah.
therapists can't help, because they say things to us like eat less and exercise more.
Totally.
Makes
Yeah.
no sense. Like,
Right.
that will not work for me. So you have to know us. And so that's really the connection that we need. Is we need to be with our people, the people who have dug cookies out of the garbage. Like, it sounds weird, but it's true. And then we feel that heals us, right? That completes us. And it's not just groups, like, you have to do the work as well. But my experience is part of being able to do the work is being with people who get you.
Yeah, completely. And I think with what you're saying of people don't really understand it, in my experience, and I'm curious if you agree with this, I think because it's food and because it's not like we're talking about heroin where someone's like, oh, I don't know anything about that because I've never done it. It's like, I how do I explain this? I think people who don't get it think that they get it because people have had the experience of like overeating before, but it's not the same thing. So then it makes it even trickier.
Yeah, and lonelier too.
Yeah, yeah.
Right? It's lonely when people make suggestions to us that miss. Right?
Yeah.
They don't It's lonely because then we feel like a pariah, like, wow, I must be really bad that people
Yeah.
are saying these things and they don't work for me. It's like intuitive eating. I mean, people would tell me about that and I'd be like, yeah, I intuit that I should eat more. Like, it's not working, And
Yeah.
then because it's not working for me and everybody's acting like it's such a good idea, which it's a good idea, but it didn't pan out for me, then we feel even worse. And of course, as emotional eaters, we blame ourselves. It's
Yeah.
obviously because we're so defective. And so I'm like, wow, I couldn't even do the intuitive eating thing, or I can't do
Yeah.
moderation or whatever. So all the more reason why we need our people who couldn't do it either. We all need, like, none of us could do it. And it's because people who aren't us, on paper, their suggestions make sense, but that's not going to be good enough. Because if we can't follow through on it, it doesn't matter how good an idea it is.
Completely. And I think that, well, when you were saying that it's so important to tell your partner and who you're dating, and related to that, I've also heard you talk about how emotional eaters tend to swing between two relational extremes of either smothering people with emotional closeness and reassurance seeking and oversharing, or we do the opposite and avoid and, neglect connection altogether, which I deeply related to all of that. So when did you, obviously it's related to your work, so I'm sure it maybe came up sooner because of that, but like, how soon do you tell someone, or how do you bring it up to someone that you're dating, to not get into the push pull between smothering and avoidance, but find this healthier middle ground and being honest when you need to?
Well, I think it's just really important that we get the right support from the right places. Partners shouldn't be our therapists, and partners aren't there to, fill our holes, so to speak. Sorry, wrong reference. But basically, there we need to be as complete as possible. And it's not that we need to be cured before we can have a relationship, but we have to be able to feed ourselves, or at least know where to get fed in the right ways, right? So my partner couldn't possibly understand what it's like to be an emotional eater. And it's not just that, lots of people know what overeating's about. It's, you got to know about the healing too, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have to have the experience of having been on a healing journey as well. So, and again, back to what we were talking about earlier around family, I learned early on, my family is not where I go. I cannot use them as my, self-esteem builders. I need to go to the people who can truly help me, right? You don't take your car to the trash man, right, in order to get fixed. You have to go to a car mechanic. So it's just really important taking responsibility for our healing, being in a program that can actually help us heal, so that we aren't burdening our partners with being all things to us, and being our emotional support. It's not that they can't be supportive, but with this particular problem, I think we do need somebody who has had it and has overcome it, who can help us overcome it. And I think we need to know and be responsible with seeking healing. I mean, to me, I'm on a day-to-time healing journey. Like, I will always be on a healing journey, I hope, where I don't consider myself cured. I have to be, but every day I meditate on a daily basis. I walk, I pray, I do things that can help me stay healthy so that I can show up for other people in my best, healthiest way possible.
Thank you so much. I this is so helpful to me, and I know so many people listening, because a lot of people found my work, through eating disorder recovery and, over the years. And I'm really grateful for you and for talking about this. And how common do you, having done your TED Talk and having done the work that you've done for 30 years, I'm just really curious, like, do you see it increasing, more people finding the work? Sometimes it feels common to me because I share about my relationship with it publicly. I feel like people are, like you said, like, oh, I didn't know that other people felt that way. But then also there are people who just, like, ate half of more cookie once and think it's the same. Yes, I don't know. I just was curious if you've noticed the
I
trend.
mean, I changed my podcast name from the Heal Your Hunger show, because my company's called Heal Your Hunger. I changed it from that to Confessions of a Binge Eater, because I think binge eating is super common, and people can self-select. I mean, we all have different thresholds of pain, and some people can binge once a month and that's too much for them. They're like, this sucks. And as well as I do, you can wipe out all, like, a lot of progress with one binge. Like,
Mhm.
my binges were like 3,000 calories. Like, I can wipe out some weight loss efforts, really quickly. And I tell my clients that too. It's like all it takes is one binge a week to never lose weight. You will gain weight, because if you binge like I binge, and not everybody does, for some people 5 cookies is a binge, but it's who's to say, right?
Mhm.
It's an internal threshold of pain, and if you've had enough and you want help, that's all that's required. Like,
Mhm.
if you should be living differently than you're living, if
Yeah.
if there's something inside of you that's just saying this is not okay, like something's got to change. And I did have that moment where I was like, I cannot go up and down the scale one more time. This is insanity, and just having that moment where you're like, whoa, is this going to be my whole life? Like, am I going to be doing this for the next, 50 years? I can't. So everybody has a different moment of desperation. And I just hope it's sooner rather than later. I talked to one woman recently she's, I think, one of 6 kids or whatever. And she's obese and in her 70s, and she said, Tricia, all my siblings, she was the youngest, all my older siblings died of diabetes. Yeah. And she's like, I that can't be me. I'm next and I've got to do something. So this is a terrible, horrible condition, and you can bet a lot of those siblings lost limbs before they died, right? As an attempt to save their lives. And the extent to which we can self-destruct is very horrifying. So anytime we have that moment where we're like, enough, we have to seize it, because we can go back into denial really easily. Like, oh, it's not so bad. Or, oh, I had a good day. Here, all the time people are like, well, I had a good couple days. As if that means they're on their way. No. So what? You had a good couple days. I mean, great, but that does not make a healing path. Good couple days where by hook or by crook you're not binging, that's not a healing plan. That's crossing your fingers and hoping for the best. And it's not going to work out if you have this condition. So you got to take action. You got to take it freaking seriously, and take serious action. Otherwise, it's going to be one day after the next, one year after the next, and eventually some really dire health issues.
Yeah, and I think like
And on that
you
happy note,
said before, yeah, because it's food and it's not some of these harder things, I think it's an easier one to rationalize, at least
oh,
for me. So anyway, thank you. The weight of it I do think is important, but yeah, I guess there's also so much lightness to it that you also bring to this, but I needed to hear the weight of it, and I think the lightness is important, but I actually think there's quite a lot of that, so it's helpful for someone in it to hear it how you just put it.
yeah.
Um, but
Thank you.
thank you. We'll end with some lightness right now of just thank you so much for doing this, and
Yeah.
it's been really nice to connect with you, and yeah, I'm excited for more, and I hope that everyone checks out your work and Heal Your Hunger, and I certainly have gone in deep with exploring your podcast is basically you talking about your experience with all of this stuff, and there are so many episodes, and it's fantastic, and I'm going to link to all of it. But yeah, I just really appreciate you and all the work that you do, and that I'm truly like, I was thinking about it yesterday. I can't believe that your publicist was like, TED Talk about this, like have her on your podcast, and I saw it, and I'm here with you now, and I'm so grateful for that because hadn't heard of your work before that, and now I get to experience it, and so I'm really grateful, and yeah, just thank you again so much.
Thanks for having me, Katie. It's been a real pleasure to be on twice. So thank you for that honor. And the good news is there is hope. Nobody has to suffer with this. You know, does it take work? Yeah, but my mentor used to say the only place success comes before work is in the dictionary. So there you go.
Yeah. Yeah, even though it's true doesn't make it less annoying, but you have to to do it. And I think the things worth having in life, anything with richness, like takes some grit. So anyway, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me.
Just give me a little bit of time, but stick around, and I'll let you in on that more when I get a little bit more through it. But I guess the Substack is probably the best place to find out more about that. I will put up a question box when this airs, and we can talk about the video thing, what you think about that. I think I'm going to do whatever I end up doing, I would like to know what you want from me, but I think ultimately you want me to do something that is like sustainable and I can continue, and that might have to be my call. But maybe we can do some clips, or we're just figuring it out. All right, well, have a great rest of your day or night or morning, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye. Oh, let's do the deep breath. I didn't do that with her. Inhale, let it out. 2026. Bye. Oh, should we do an emoji? What should the emoji be? Let's do the emoji as a flower of your choice, or a Valentine's Day emoji of your choice. Okay.